Well, hello out there, everyone. Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor, and we're coming to you live from Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland, Canada. And tonight's guest on the show is a nice keynote speaker, corporate trainer, consultant, coach, and author. He's worked with brands like Google, UPS, and LinkedIn. And I'm sure you probably heard of those little companies. In fact, it was while working with Google that he visited St. John's, Newfoundland. Now, my guest is also known as the communications connoisseur. He is obsessed with all aspects of communication, so we certainly have something in common there. He likes to entertain and enlighten and empower people to communicate nicely and more effectively. He majored in radio and television broadcasting and followed by business marketing. And this is really a fun fact about Dave. He also graduated from studying improv comedy with the Second City in Toronto, which I think is absolutely amazingly interesting and cool. And tonight he's going to communicate with me on Let's Get Writing. So please, everyone, if you have questions or anything you want to know, we'll try and follow that. And comment. Let us know where you're watching from. And I would like you now to meet a nice Canadian boy who ended up living in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Dave Delaney, to the show.
Oh, thank you. Dave. Hey, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here from sunny and hot Nashville, which I'm still getting used to. Oh, no, I'm still getting used to it. I'm much more of a winter kind of guy, but, it is what it is.
Listen, you're Canadian, so you know all about winter, and I'm a Newfoundlander, so I definitely know all about it.
Oh, man, you totally know. I'm from Toronto. I mean, Toronto. There was a great Rick Mercer bit years ago about like snow in Toronto. If you look it up on YouTube, look up Rick Mercer snow in Toronto. It's amazing. It's hilarious. Trust me.
I'm sure it threw you all into a tailspin. But hey, I have been in Toronto in January and February. And let me tell you, it's colder than it is here. That wind whistling through those buildings, it's colder, but you don't have the snow.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we get the lake wind and through the skyscrapers. It's kind of brutal that way. And I was pleasantly surprised when I was in St. John's in January a couple of years ago. It was unseasonably warm, and it was kind of just very strange. I remember the taxi driver and I were like, "What's going on here? This is crazy." But yeah, hi Vicky.
Oh, Vicky. Hi, Vicky. Hi, Vicky. That can happen. It can. We can get that because we're a maritime province, an Atlantic province. We can get the effect of the ocean and we can get some weird weather. And that means we can get a snowstorm in June. And I did not say that. We're actually having pretty good weather. But, if we're going to talk about places, I got to tell you a little bit about my Tennessee experiences. I went many times, mainly to Memphis. But it's where I got my one and only speeding ticket in one of those, Oh, that's my dog.
Peggy's at camp, so we're safe on my end.
And I also lost my favorite sun hat when I was fishing for bass. I was on the Tennessee-Arkansas border. And also, it gets better. We did catch a whole bunch of bass, and we went to a place called the Botel. And they cooked that bass. I had okra, and I dined on hominy grits, and I'm not sure what other things, but they have their own culture, the same as we have things in Newfoundland, and they are seriously great with their hospitality. And, it was such a wonderful, warm place. But anyway, when I went to get the fishing license, I'm almost done. They said, we need to see your driver's license. So I pull out the Newfoundland license, driver's license. They go, where are you from? Where? So anyway, we got through that. Obviously, I got my fish. But anyway, it was just so much fun and such a neat place. So I'm sure you're enjoying it.
It's nice to see Americans getting educated on Newfoundland, like seeing like so many have seen come from away now. So they're getting schooled slowly but surely. But at least you didn't have to kiss a catfish.
I didn't say I didn't kiss a bass.
I have
I
kissed the
did
cod.
some kissing that night.
I have kissed a cod, so I have officially been screeched in. So
Oh, wonderful.
I've got that going for me as well.
Oh my gosh. But, how did you end up in the country music capital of Nashville? Whatever happened, Dave?
Yeah, well, I started a country band, and no, that's not true at all.
I like that one.
In fact, I'm the only one in Nashville that doesn't actually play any music. So yeah, my crazy story is I took a trip to Ireland in 1998, actually 96, but 98, I met my wife there in Galway, Ireland, right across from you guys in the Atlantic. And we, we fell madly in love. We lived in Ireland and Scotland and a bunch of other places, traveling around Europe for a few years. And we got married in Memphis. And it turns out, of course, that she is actually from Tennessee, of all places. So I go all the way from Canada, from Toronto to Ireland to meet a nice girl from Tennessee. So, and we got married, subsequently had Irish twins. So they're 11 and a half months apart. We still have them, although we're not sure if that's going to work out because they're teenagers now. So we're a little, we'll see. And then we moved we did 6 winters in Toronto, and that was enough for her. So she was like, let's try something different. So we moved to Nashville, and we've been here 13 years, long enough for it to become a hockey town and see poutine appear on all the menus.
Oh, there you go. You go. You're feeling more at home. But that's a lovely story. Does your wife have red hair by any chance?
She does not. No, she does not.
How about your kids?
No, not at all. No.
Oh well. She's I just thought maybe being over in Ireland, she might have picked up some of that red hair.
Right. No. No, she did not.
Well, Dave, let's talk about what we're here to do. Your website is davedelaney.me, and you have a wonderful book called New Business Networking, which is about communicating with other professionals in the business and career capacity. Mm-hmm. You run networking for nice people. There's lots of nices in here. You have a weekly newsletter called The Nice Maker, where you share nice stuff. So you're really busy. You're doing a lot of things. How does this all come together? And what kind of advice do you have for people?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it really comes down to communication, as you mentioned, and being nice about the way you approach and you approach people and you build relationships. And networking to me has always been a two-way street, and sometimes it's a one-way street. But in the one-way way, it's all about just serving your community and helping people. And call it karma, call it what you like, but good things come back to you when you, open yourself up and look for ways to help people through introductions or through advice or sharing information, whatever it may be. So I'm a big proponent of networking, but doing it nicely rather than, because networking has negative connotations too. Everybody's been to a networking event where they felt like they needed a shower when they got home because it just felt so icky. And that's what I'm not about. So.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you go to networking events and it's suggested make sure you have a stack of business cards, and it's like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It's like you're playing poker, right. And you're receiving cards, and it can be overwhelming. And even though you're there and it's a networking event, how do you make those contacts that become meaningful? And I think you do tackle that a lot in your book, how to make those events work better. And just share some of your ideas and concepts, if you wouldn't mind.
For sure. Well, back when there were events, so depending on when this
long ago.
Right. Yes. When we are meeting in person, and my thinking with business cards is basically, when you go to a networking event, talk to strangers, meet new people, try to seek out the wallflowers because they're usually more introverted or perhaps a little shy, and they don't really know. Maybe there's someone who's there and they don't know why they're there or what have you. So seek those people out, have conversations, and if you strike a nice conversation with that person and you'd like to follow up, you ask them for their business card, and you ask them for their card because that's their contact information. But you don't have to do it with your hand in your pocket, ready to whip out your card, because guess what? Like, you have their card. So now it's on you to follow up with them. And when I talk about networking, I talk about the three key things about networking. One is to show up. The second is to catch up, or excuse me, the second is to follow up. And the third is to catch up. So the other really important factors are following up with those people rather than, coming back from a conference and having a stack of business cards collecting dust on your desk for months, and then you throw them away because you can't remember who they are. So instead, like getting the, following up with people and then catching up over time, spend, maybe it's 6 months later or a year later, maybe it's that conference coming back around again. That's a good time to follow up with people and say, hey, it was so great to meet you last year. Are you going back this year? And, maybe we can catch up over lunch or coffee or something. So, that's in person. And then of course, nowadays with so much of this, so much of the online format, we are still showing up. We're still having a conversation right now. So it would be silly for me not to follow up with you later to check in to see how things are going and to catch up. When I get to finally bring my family to Newfoundland and finally get to visit Gander, because I've been dying to, I'll reach out and maybe we could do coffee. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, we did talk about Gander, which is our neighbor to the east a little bit, and like the rich history of Newfoundland. But definitely, when you come, we're definitely going to do a coffee. Hopefully, we can.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
hopefully.
The environment has changed so much, and we have to take a lot of what we do online now. And there's no doubt that can pose challenges if people aren't comfortable going online, if they're not feeling good with video. Some people are a little reluctant to put themselves out there. They're not as comfortable. I don't know if you have any tips for them, but you often train for Google, which I think is super impressive. And it's very obvious that when I hear you talk, you're very skilled at sharing ideas and encouraging people to think of new things. But talk a little bit about that, your experience with Google and just what we can do if people are out of their comfort zone going online to share or present themselves. Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, if you're uncomfortable, I think it's really important. Something I challenge people to do, like with, if you're more introverted or if you lean that way, the introverts are like the smartest people out there. They're the ones who are like the brains. I always feel like I'm the extrovert, so I'm just like a total spaz. And it's my wife who's like more introverted, my son who's more introverted, my daughter is more like me. I always think that at events and online, overcoming it's for especially if you're more introverted, like you literally feel exhausted talking to people, and that happens. And depending on where you are on that spectrum, the more introverted you are, the more exhausted you are after talking to a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. So I always say, like, set yourself a goal, and for an in-person event, maybe the goal is go to a networking event for 20 minutes and talk to one person. That's your goal. Then leave. You have to talk to one person within 20 minutes of being there. And then you have full permission to go home and leave. Same thing. And then the next time you go to one, say, let's go, like, I'll do 30 minutes and talk to two people. That's it. And then I can leave. And so just trying to do that. And then as far as online goes, it's so important to understand that, like, nobody goes to a networking event virtually or in person because they don't want to meet people, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's standing there by themselves because they don't want anyone to talk to them. They wouldn't go to these events virtually or in person if they didn't want to meet people. So that's your permission right there to seek those people out and find that person who's standing there or who's in the room virtually with no one to speak with. And that's when you can just open up the conversation and allow that person to do the bulk of the talking. My son is kind of shy, and I always tell him, it's easy if you ask the questions, because that lets the person do all the talking. And you don't have to talk that much. You can just say, what brings you here? How are you doing today? How did that make you feel? What did you do next? And these follow-up questions that allow that person that you're speaking with do all the talking or most of the talking. And you can kind of make it a little easier on yourself. But I do encourage you to consider the fact that everybody's human. We're all, unless you're talking to a bot, which is just weird. But everybody's human. So as awkward as this is, And it is awkward. It's definitely more awkward to do this virtually than in person. But it is what it is. And so it's just a new form of communication that we can use to connect with one another.
Yeah, and I think when you jump in and do it, I remember I had not been doing that much live on the internet. And it was actually Vicky Nee who challenged me to do a 30-day, do a live every day. It was part of a group with a lady named Fallon Zoe. But it was Vicky who drew me in, and I thought, oh, I don't know. And the first few that I did, I was kind of, ugh. But, by the end of 30 days, they say so many days to make a habit.
Right.
By the end of doing that and every day just showing up, and even if it was 2 or 3 minutes, some days a little longer, by the end of that, I was pretty comfortable. I didn't care anymore. Like the first few, you were a little like, well, and then you think like, you know what? You're not that important. There's probably not too many people listening to you. So chill out. And just get out there and try it.
Right. And don't fear failure. I mean, that's a big message I have, in a lot of what I write about and in the workshops that I do. And in my keynote, I do a keynote presentation called The Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And that secret weapon between us is improv, right, which you mentioned at the beginning. But improv teaches us not to fear failure. Like you have to get up and go on stage if you're an improv actor. And some of the scenes and some of the things you do in performance are going to fail. It's inevitable because it's improv. So,
it's improv.
But life is improv. I like Henry Rollins, old punk rocker from Black Flag. Henry Rollins has this wonderful quote of his whole career has been 30 years of one long uninterrupted improv, which I love. So life is improv. So not fearing failure is a key part of that for sure.
And I think that concept, you have another book that we're going to touch upon now, which is called Improve with Improv.
Right.
I like that title, It's really cute. But Improve with Improv. And you talk about don't fear failure and then also learn to listen. Right. And I love that because it's exciting to read those pieces of advice, and it may sound simple, but listening and say, as I'm talking to you here, I'm listening, I'm looking for things that I can pick up on and maybe go back and ask another question. It's just a very easy life strategy. And I think improv teaches you, and that's the link I took from it. It teaches you to listen and kind of react. And so you're Improve with Improv. You're going to share that book with us, a few viewers maybe.
Yeah, that's right. So right now this is my my only little caveat to I'm doing a social media kind of break right now that for the first time since creating the accounts back in 06, 07. And so right now I'm kind of taking a break on social media, and that includes my email newsletter. However, if you go to nicemaker.co, .co, you can sign up for my Nice Maker newsletter. And when you do that, you'll get a free copy of my Improve with Improv with illustrations by the talented Danielle Rossi, a great graphic artist, another Canadian, by the way, who did all the illustrations. And it's a little mini ebook, but it goes into some techniques about listening more effectively and about not fearing failure, and also about leading with acceptance and using this rule in improv called yes and how to apply that to your life. So, but nicemaker.co is the link that you can find that newsletter, and you will get the next newsletter August 7th, by the way.
August 7th. And actually, that is what I did. I signed up for your newsletter and I got the book and I read it and I thought, this is so cool. And I'm sure that takes you back to your Second City experiences. And that must have been really quite something. Tell us a few secrets.
So I studied at Second City, and Second City has like several different levels. And, especially with your audience, probably, I assume, being primarily Canadian, you guys know SCTV, of course, I hope. But sometimes people don't know Second City. And I'm like, wait, you don't know Second City? But at any rate, so Second City they have a program that teaches improv. It's multiple levels. And I went through that program. And after graduating the program, I went to London, England, not Ontario, to be clear. London, Ontario is lovely as well. And went to London, England, and I performed. I went to a pub and they had an improv show. And they were really good. So after the show, I said, hey guys, is there any way that I could come and maybe perform some improv with you sometime? Like maybe a scene or two or something. And they were like, no, like, who are you? Go back to your table. I was like, yeah, right. And then one of them said, have you done improv before? And I said, yeah, I trained with Second City in Toronto. And as soon as I said I trained with Second City, they're like, can you come back next Saturday? And I'm like, yeah. So I went back and performed improv there, and then went to Galway, Ireland, and ended up living in Galway. And that's where I founded a group of different actors I found, and I put together an improv troupe there, and we performed every Thursday night. And fast forward quite a few years. And I started, during that time, I did a little bit of corporate training on communication using improv skills. And then I spoke in 2015 at HubSpot's Inbound conference, which draws about 30,000 people. At least it did when we had conferences. Really looking forward to that again one day. And I did this talk, Improve with Improv, which evolved into the Master Communicator's Secret Weapon talk. And the feedback was just so great that I started doing I started doing workshops on communication, internal communication. And a lot of that involves improv skills and things. So started weaving that in, and I did that for FedEx back in January, and have had just an amazing experience sharing the lessons that I learned from this, and how you can apply them in your day-to-day life without having to perform improv, God forbid. But actually just use these skills. And so, it's been a fun ride, and weaving that in to tapping back into something that I was so passionate about. And then, it's funny, Judd Apatow, director and writer and so forth. He wrote a book called Sick in the Head, which I highly recommend. It's interviews he did as a teenager with the world's most famous comedians. And, but I read that book and I got so inspired that I went and auditioned for an improv troupe in Nashville. And I got a call back. And so a Saturday afternoon, I'm getting dressed to go to this callback. And my wife's like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And I had to confess to her, I got a call back for an improv troupe. And she had seen me do improv back in the day, but she was like, wait, what? What are you doing? And I said, yeah, I gotta, So I went and I got accepted as a cast member. And I started performing improv again for about a year, until I realized, oh wait, I have a business and family, and I can't
grow up. No.
Right. Well, it was kind of like I use the analogy in Nashville because, a lot of guys I know were kind of musicians back in the day, and then they, you hit your sort of 40s, mid 40s, and then you're like, you just want to tap back into that, and so they started garage bands and started noodling around again. And so being, more of an improv nerd, I guess it made sense for me to kind of tap back into that. So that's been fun. And I still occasionally perform with them too, which is great.
But still such a good skill, because it made you kind of put it out there. And it's said many times, people fear public speaking more than death. And I'm thinking no, really? More than death?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that people can have such a fear of public speaking. So it's very cool that you can give them some tools that they can take, and this is in both your books, which I find really, really wonderful. And don't forget, everyone, I'm going to remind you again, it's davedelaney.me. And if you sign up for Dave's newsletter, you can get Improve with Improv. It's a little bonus that comes with that. And that brings me back to your newsletter, which is really fun. Your newsletter is not sort of, what would I say, like you writing a bunch of things, but you're actually sharing a lot of cool ideas, and you can click into these things. Dave, how do you do it? I mean, you have so much in your newsletter. I'm thinking, what does this guy work 23 hours a day and never sleep? How do you pull that newsletter together? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I use something called Instapaper, which is a bookmarking app that you can use to bookmark things that you find on the web. And it has an email address. So if I'm listening to a podcast that I enjoy, and I'm a big podcasting nerd too, I can forward a podcast I can send that to that email address, and then it adds it to my Instapaper. so that when I go on my Instapaper, I can find all the links that I shared in that and extract the things that I find most relevant to for each edition of the Nice Maker newsletter. So I send the newsletter normally once a week, every Friday morning. The idea of it is to share tools and tips and stories of inspiration all around the term nice. Finding new business is nice, right? Earning a living is nice.
Is nice.
Using empathy is nice, especially in this day and age. Being informed about I have I wouldn't say it's a passion so much, but it's maybe it is a passion of people understanding what's going on online. Maybe it's because I've been online forever, but I find that it's extremely important for people to understand how the algorithms work in social networks and how misinformation can really mess you up. And there's plenty of examples of that. So I share story like examples, nice, keeping it in nice. Like I'm not sharing bad news, but I'll share nice resources and tips for finding your way through that as well. So, and then of course I'll plug my own blog posts that I write, and any speaking engagements and things that I'm up to as well. So, and a song of the week as well. So I always have a YouTube song of the week that I always want to. Sometimes it's just a song I've been listening to that I enjoy. Sometimes the song has a story related to what's going on in my life at the moment, but I've decided to avoid sharing that. And so I don't have an explanation for the song. But every once in a while, somebody will reply and say, "Hey, I love that song. What's that about?" A good example of that is I'm a big fan. So we talked before a little bit about Halifax. I spent a lot of time in Halifax back in the day, and I know you spent some time in Moncton as well. And I was a big fan of Eric's Trip, which was a band from Moncton who spent a lot of time playing it in Halifax back in the day, and in Toronto too. And Julie Doiron was one of the main people in that band, and she's gone on to a really great solo career. But she's one of those people that I feel like she's kind of one of the new Canadian, or not new, because she's been around a long time, but a Canadian talent that sings about Canada, but in a kind of not a blatant way, not a Stomp and Tom, but more of a Tragically Hip sort of, or even a Gordon Lightfoot kind of way of slipping in references to life in Moncton or winter or things like that. So anyway, that's one of those videos that I shared in the Nice Maker without explanation, but hoping that people would discover Julie Doiron, because she's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, well, you shared a good tip there, because I kept wondering, man, what does this guy, how does he get all this information and put it together? And that's a really fun newsletter. You always find something in there. So I encourage people to check it out. And Dave, I wanted to talk to you about blogging, because you do blog. Yep. And I find you share a lot of your feelings. You're pretty open with your blogging. And it's on your webpage. I think we can get the link there, davedelaney.me. And just talk a little bit about blogging, because people get into it and then they get into it over their head. And I bet you have some good advice for them.
Yeah, it depends on what what your goals are with blogging. I'm still a big fan of personal blogging, even though it's maybe something, the term blog came from weblog, which was about, journal, like online journaling. I think, I'm not sure who coined blog. It might've been Robert Scoble, possibly, back in the day. And you look at I'm totally drawing a blank right now, but it doesn't matter. My point with blogging is, if it's a personal blog, try to just commit to or even if it's a professional blog, try to commit to an editorial calendar if you can. Now, I'm saying that, but I need to practice what I preach, because I don't do this, and I should, but I don't. But I found the most success, meaning most comments and eyeballs on my blog during periods where I blogged every day or weekly at least. So the more you blog, I think the more response you're going to get. But again, I think there's a lot to be said. I know I've done workshops with businesses on blogging for their business and creating content for business. And there's a lot of great strategic ways that you can use blogging to grow your business, and one way I would recommend with that is, depending on the business you're in, talk to your sales department, talk to your customer service department, talk to your colleagues, talk to your customers, and write about the common questions that you get for your industry, and create a blog for your business. That's what I did. I wrote 5 blog posts a week when I worked with a consumer electronics company, and I ran social media and content for them for 4.5 years. So I really do encourage you to tap into that. Blogging is a little confusing nowadays too, because a lot of, when I speak for Google, because I do training and speaking for Google, I ask the room, like, show of hands, how many people have a blog? And like no hands go up. And then I say, how many people have a website, a CMS, a content management system? And some hands go up. And then I say, how many people have a website that's hosted on WordPress or Wix or Squarespace or what have you? And most hands go up, right? And then I say, guess what? You have a blog. So blogging has changed. Like a lot of technology, that one of the biggest challenges with it and communicating about technology is things change names. So like Twitter, to tweet used to be called microblogging back in the day. Yeah, and Twitter had competitors like JaiQ and Pounce and Plurk and these other social networks that came and left, but that were very similar in that, in Twitter's sort of brevity and speed. But so my point to this is that these terms change, and so the word blog even changes. To some people, they may think blogging like, oh, that's so Web 2.0 or Web 2.0, or I don't know what number or point we're at with the web at this point. But I do encourage you, especially as writers, to use a blog to share, what's going on in your life. I do think that always consider the reader and always think about what's in it for them. That's one key thing. Rather than just pontificate or share a tale or something from your life, try to think as you're writing it, like, how does this apply to the reader? What's the lesson in this the reader can take away? And maybe it's just a laugh. Maybe it's just a bunch of laughs, like a David Sedaris article or something. Whatever it is, give it, consider what's in it for me, what's in it for the reader as you're writing for them. So that's one thing.
Very good tips, actually. And it's a bit of discipline. And I think using some sort of a platform to keep you organized is very beneficial when you're doing things like this. Any form of writing, anyone who's a writer knows that they have to sit down and focus and just get it done. Yeah. It's not going to get done by itself, but some really, really great tips. And Dave, like, kind of bringing it all together, you now cannot go out and do your public appearances. So you're offering services online to companies and corporations, maybe even someone in Newfoundland needs some coaching right now. So
I would love that. Virtually would be great. In person would be even better. I'm always looking for an excuse to get back there. And as I mentioned, I'm dying to take my kids and my wife to Newfoundland so they can come and explore the Rock as well, because it's such a great place and amazing people.
It's unique, and if you liked Ireland, if you guys liked Ireland, you're gonna, you obviously know you'll love Newfoundland. And thank you so much for sharing the things you shared tonight and taking the time with us. So appreciate it. Before we go, I got to ask, what's one nice thing about Nashville besides country music? You can't use that one.
Yeah, and I'm not going to use pedal taverns either, because that's we just want those to go away. What's one nice thing about Nashville? Gosh, there's lots of nice things about Nashville. What's one? Well, like Newfoundland, you have real, like, Southern hospitality is a real thing, and people are genuinely amazing here. When I moved to Nashville, I tell that story a lot, and I'll shamelessly promote it because you told me to.
Yes, put it up there.
There it is. New Business Networking. You can find it on Amazon and stuff. But I share the story.
We'll have a link there too.
Oh, thank you. But I share the story in it about moving from Toronto to Nashville without knowing anyone here aside from my wife and kids. and having to really network my way to finding a job when we moved here. And people were just always so great about accepting my invitations or saying, I would reach out to a company and say, hey, I would love to meet with you, to talk about your industry or talk about your business a little bit and learn more about you, because I've been watching what you've been doing and I love what you've been doing. And they'd say, yeah, come on in. Like, Wednesday sound good? 4:00? What? Yeah, of course. And so people were like, doors are always open. And so I think Southern hospitality, is alive and well. So that's definitely a big nice thing about Nashville for sure. And the fact that we have hockey and poutine as well.
Well, I agree with you on the Southern hospitality. I've met many wonderful people in my trips south. And and we'll say hello to anybody out there who might be watching from wherever. And if you're seeing this on the rerun, let us know where you are in the world, because we'd love to know that. And don't forget to sign up for Dave's newsletter, and it's called The Nice Maker, is it not?
That is correct. That's
.co?
.co. .ca. You can find it on my blog as well.
Okay, and your website. So, Jane, thank you so much. Enjoy your evening in Nashville, and I look forward to your follow-up, because that's what you do.
Yeah,
follow-up.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Vicki, for watching.
Yeah, Vicki. Bye, Vicki, and thank you for the link. Have a great night, everyone, and Let's Get Writing. We'll be here next week. Gemma Hickey is going to be the guest, and I think you'll enjoy that show. I'm not going to say any more. We'll be promoting it. Have a great night, Dave.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.